You know, many of you who know me, my name is Dr McDougall, for those of you who don't, know that I'm not politically correct. I have this inability to control my tongue. And I usually try and say things the way I see them without offending people. I have the opportunity to introduce somebody else who speaks the truth too, and speaks it a little more politically correct than I do, though. The medical business is a business I'm very proud to be involved in. I love being a doctor. The medical business succeeds with acute problems. In other words, if you have a broken bone or an infection or a laceration, something like that, the medical business can help you tremendously. Unfortunately, just by definition, the medical business fails with chronic disease. That's why we call it chronic disease. It never goes away, right? So it fails. And 80 to 90% of the problems that you, your families, your friends have are chronic diseases. Chronic obesity, chronic indigestion, constipation, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. They're chronic diseases, arthritis, and so on. I think the best thing for us to do in the medical business is just to admit that we can't solve chronic disease problems, but somehow doctors, being people, can't do that. So instead of admitting that we fail when it comes to our patients, what we do is we send the patients off to specialists. Okay? So if I can't solve your problem as a medical doctor, I just send you off to the gastrointestinal specialist or the cardiologist, and if he or she can't solve your problem, they send you off to the next specialist and the next specialist and the next specialist and so on, until finally everybody gives up, and then they send you to the psychologist or the psychiatrist. And he or she doesn't take responsibility either. They don't say, you know, I can't solve your problem. They say, it's your fault. Okay? So nobody takes responsibility. The psychologist and the psychiatrist are at the bottom of the pile, which gives you some idea of what I think of psychologists and psychiatrists. But I won't expand upon that. Fortunately, that all changed for me. It changed for me, and I really, this was a unique experience. I'm sure there are many, many other people in this field that are outstanding also. I've just met too few professionally. It changed for me one day when we were setting up the clinic. I run a clinic, and Mary and I do, in Santa Rosa, California, and we were trying to put together the best possible staff that we could find. And so I was looking for a psychologist. Actually, it was just a token psychologist I was looking for, because I figured I need to have one on staff to be well-rounded, right? And so I'm asking around, and you heard mention a friend of mine, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who's, some of you know, he runs a fasting clinic up near my place in Santa Rosa. And he says, well, you know, one of your friends is one of the best psychologists that I know of. And he says, besides that, he says, John, you know, you're pretty good at speaking. He says, but this guy's better. And I said, couldn't be. He says, yeah, he's better than you are. I said, okay, we'll see. Well, we have at our clinic a two-tier system of evaluation. People get done with a meal and they say nothing, or they get done with a meal and they go, wow, that was amazing. Like last night's dinner. Isn't that fantastic? Yeah, that was amazing. Well, that's the way we rate our staff too. You know, if people don't say anything, then we get the message. But if they walk out of that lecture and they go, wow, that was the most amazing thing I have ever heard, then we know that we're doing our job and we got the right people working with us. And that's the kind of person I have the privilege to introduce to you today, is a man that will leave you breathless in his presentation. Dr. Doug Lisle is that kind of psychologist, that kind of presenter, a man who really understands the business and will leave you walking out of this room saying, that was absolutely amazing. Doug?
No pressure, though. It's like exactly what you're not supposed to do to people. Well, you heard, my name's Doug Lisle. I'm a psychologist. It wasn't my first choice. I really wanted to be an artist. And you'll see why. The latent talent is there. What I'm going to talk about today is the biggest problem that we face, usually in our personal lives and collectively as a culture. It's a problem that I call the pleasure trap. The problem is that most of us in this room know what direction to head. And not only that, the world is starting to come around. Educated people everywhere are starting to get a clue that the direction that we're heading is the wrong one and that we need to make a change. But even after we learn what direction to go, it is still very, very difficult to go that way. And this is really the story of why that's true. In order to understand why it is that once we know what direction to go and why it is that it's hard to get there, we need to ask and answer the greatest philosophical question of all time. Y'all know what that is, of course. It is not a sandwich. It is not a hat. I can hear you. Of course it's a shark. That was never in doubt. This one is a great white. You can tell by the distinctive markings. The question is, why does a shark have teeth?
To rip and tear.
To rip and tear. Way too complicated. To eat. A shark has teeth. Oh, this thing has a time delay. The shark has teeth so that it can eat. Absolutely. That's exactly why a shark has teeth. To eat. Why does a shark eat? To live, to survive. That's right. A shark has teeth so that it will live and survive. This should come up soon. Please come up. To survive. Now, I know what most of you are thinking right now. You don't really have to tell me. You're thinking, I'm really glad I got here and got a good place to sit. Because this guy's really something. It's good information here. The question is, what's the point of its survival? What's it doing here? It's living to reproduce. It has teeth so that it can survive and so that it can eat. And it eats to survive, and it can survive so that it can reproduce, so that it can have these little guys do this all over again. And around and around and around and around this goes. And it's been going that way for millions upon millions upon millions of years. Now you might say to yourself, this is a rather ridiculous arrangement. You might even want to complain about it. I'm not sure where to file that complaint. But this is what's going on. Now, I'm not sure who set this up, where, when, how, all that sort of thing. I leave questions of ultimate origins to theologians and philosophers and people like that. But what I do know is, I know how it's set up. And it is set up so that this guy will do his job, his or her job in nature, to eat to survive so that it can reproduce, so that the little ones can do it all over again. Now, and there it is right there. Isn't that cool? Now, this guy will do this job, and he's doing it according to a particular formula. But really, why it is that this creature will do what it's going to do is because of a specific property of its organization. And that organization is embedded in its genetic code. How does the shark know how to do these things? How does it know how to eat, what to eat, how to survive, how to reproduce? Anybody know? Instincts, exactly. That's exactly how this is going. See, I anticipated that, how clever. Now, the question is, where are those instincts? Are those instincts located in that tail right there? Don't quit just cutting to the punchline. You guys are just way too smart. It's not up there in the dorsal fin so cleverly and artistically drawn there, and it's not actually even in those teeth. The instincts are actually located in the brain, and those instincts are actually something that we call neural circuits. Instincts are in fact patterns of the way those neurons are put together, and they're put together in a specific way so that when particular kinds of environmental inputs come into the sensory system, those instincts will fire, or those neural circuits will fire, and they will cause specific types of behavior to take place. And that is how that works. Those instincts had to be designed, and they were designed according to specifications in the genetic code so that that creature will in fact do the things it needs to do to survive and to reproduce. Now, does this thing actually have a little neon sign that comes across its eyeballs that says the instinct is now saying that you have to do what's necessary for survival and reproduction? How does it know what to do? How does this thing work? How do the instincts work? Well, they work according to feelings. Now, I'm a psychologist. I care about feelings. I care about the feelings of all things, including sharks. And some of you really haven't thought this through, but sharks have feelings too. What this shark is going to do is this shark needs to move in particular ways, highly specific ways. This shark could do any number of potential movements. This thing has the capacity to just turn circles in the water like this, and then it could just go ahead and turn circles the other way. And then it could actually go like this in a spiral, and it could actually get in front of some rock in the sea and bang its nose in and then back up and bang its nose. You could do that all day long, but it won't. This shark is actually going to move in particular stereotype patterns, and those patterns are going to be embedded in its genetic code that will tell it how to move so that it will be most successful in the drama of survival and reproduction. The way it's going to do this is that its nervous system, its motivational structure is going to be organized in a three-part fashion, and that organization looks like this. This guy will pursue pleasure. He wants to feel good, he or she. This particular one's a male, as I told you. It should be clear to anybody who's an expert. He wants to feel good. And there's going to be two primary ways that he's going to seek pleasure, or two ends that he will seek. The first will be food. And when he eats, there'll be a flood of pleasure chemistry in his brain. That will be the incentive that will tell him, yes, dummy, you just did the right thing. And eating that way is going to improve your likelihood of survival, which will improve your likelihood of reproduction, which means the little DNA will get into the next little ones and they can do it all over again. And that's how he's organized. The other kind of pleasure that he's going to be seeking is going to be sexual activity. So there's going to be two primary sources of pleasure. It's going to be eating and sexual activity, survival and reproduction. And that's how the pleasure centers of the brain are organized, and that's how his motivational system is organized to see to it that that happens. But he's also going to have another set of incentives. It's not going to be just movements associated with feeling good. He also needs to pay attention to not feel bad. And so he'll do a number of things that will help him avoid pain. So when he's hungry, that starts to actually be disturbing. And so he'll seek out the pleasure while avoiding the pain at the same time. So those things actually work together in a beautifully orchestrated fashion, so this creature does the right kinds of movements, which will increase its statistical likelihood of survival and reproduction. And that's how that's going to work. Now, it's not just enough for this creature to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. If there's a tuna flopping in the water 20 feet away and another tuna flopping in the water 50 feet away, which one does he go for? The closest one. Why would he go for the closest one? To conserve energy. It's not enough just to pursue pleasure and to avoid the pain. That won't get it done. And the reason is that another creature with neural circuits designed by nature to both pursue pleasure and avoid pain, but also to do those two things very efficiently, that creature will outcompete you in the survival of the fittest drama. So it was necessary in nature not only to have incentives to pursue pleasure, but also to have incentives to avoid pain, and yet in addition to try to do those things as meticulously, as intelligently, as efficiently as possible. And together, these three parts of the motivational structure work together so that creatures live to reproduce. This is why predators all over the earth go after the weak, the sick, the slow, the young, the isolated, and the injured. They do that because it's more efficient. They have neural circuits in their brains that are designed by nature to look for a stumble, a flaw, any kind of weakness. That's how they're organized. This is why birds, when they're migrating, will migrate in that characteristic V pattern, and they'll do that so that they can draft on each other, so that they can actually save the energy, because the birds that didn't do that didn't make it. They ran out of energy across evolutionary time. So this is how creatures are organized. Now, to be thorough, I have to tell you that there's one other reason why those birds go in that V pattern. My mother says I shouldn't be this thorough. They also do that because that way when they poo-poo, they don't go in each other's faces. That's the other reason. She says that kind of talk is exactly why she doesn't have any grandchildren. Now, this shark, when it's pursuing its pleasures and doing a good job of it, feeding, reproducing, a successful shark is a happy shark. But you might be saying to yourself, there must be more to life than just the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain and doing that efficiently. There must be more to the story of how this works. And indeed, there is more to the story. You might say, you know, that may be true for some people. I see some people, that's all they do. Pursue pleasure, avoid pain, sit in the chair, that's all they do. But not me. My life is more subtle. There's more context to it. There's more contours. And indeed, there is more. Now, what there is more to life is a whole subtle set of operations that we need a whole nother species in order to understand. And you all know what this is. You know, I'm not altogether happy with this crowd. No, ma'am, this is not a snowman with a hula hoop. I heard you. It's not a sandwich. Somebody has a sandwich fixation. It takes years of therapy. You know, some of you have something in common with my father. My father, Ralph, for inexplicable reasons, refused to either morally or financially support my art career. See, there's friends of Ralph in the audience. Now it should be more clear to you what this is. Of course it's a bird. There's a tree right there. It's not just a bird, it's a gray shrike. A proud bird of prey of the Mideastern desert. You can tell that this one's a male by the distinctive markings. And what this creature does, this male, all spring long, is he goes and gathers things in his territory. So he'll gather bugs and grasshoppers and little pieces of cloth these days, and he'll put them on thorns. He'll impale them on thorns inside of his territory. And so if you go into the territory of a gray shrike, there's stuff all over the place, hanging in the trees and in the bushes. Anybody have any idea why it is that this little guy does this? Housekeeping. He's a good housekeeper. He's just trying to clean up the territory. No. Attract a mate. The gold digger in the front got this thing figured out. It usually takes a couple minutes. Tells us something about your learning history. Yes, what this little guy's doing is he's trying to attract a mate. So what he's really doing is showing off. That's what he's doing. And he has to do this because other gray shrikes, male gray shrikes, are also doing the same thing, and they're showing off. If you don't show off better than the other guy shows off, guess what? No pleasure for you. You're completely out of luck. That's how that works. You can see the right here, he's very cleverly winking. You can see this as he's telling you why it is that he's doing what he's doing. It's very artistic. Now, we know what he's after in the long run here. What he's after is, in fact, the pleasure hit associated with sexual activity at the end of this road. But what's interesting about this guy is that he has to go weeks where he engages in this behavior. All spring long, this little guy is running out all day long, getting stuff, putting them on thorns, getting some more stuff, putting it on thorns, back and forth and back and forth. This guy's working like crazy. And you might say to yourself, how is it that he actually knows that he has to do all those things, that he's going to keep working at it and being very diligent about this, as efficient as he can possibly be? And he has to be as efficient as possible, because if he's not, some other male gray shrike will be more efficient, have more stuff in their tree, and then he's out of luck. And we know that this is true because a rather enterprising Israeli biologist went out there and started moving stuff from one guy's tree to another guy's tree. Men have died for a lot less than that. And when they do that, it turns out when the females come sailing into town a few weeks later, after the weather is warmer and everything's pleasant, and they look around and they check out how much stuff guys have in their relative trees. If you move stuff from one guy's tree to another guy's tree, the other guy gets all the action. That's how it works. Female nervous systems are under that sort of control. And then the male's nervous systems are under control of the female nervous systems, and that's how that works. Now, the question would be, how does he know all spring long that he needs to be efficient, that he needs to really be on this thing and do as good a job as he can? Well, you might say, instinct. Of course it's instinct. Nobody teaches him this. He knows. But you might say, how does he have the incentive to know, as he's going about putting something on a thorn, does he know that this is increasing his likelihood that he's getting a little bit closer to winning a female? Does he have a little image in his head of a female gray shrike, the one that he's working for? I don't think he does. But something like this is going on inside this nervous system. As every time he takes a successful action, he's getting a little bit closer to his goal and a little bit closer. And when something bad happens, and in fact takes him the other direction, somehow he knows that that's not a good thing. And this guy is triangulating his behavior very, very efficiently, weaving it through the matrix of the entire environmental layout to try to be as efficient as he can at doing this job. Good things and bad things are happening on the way. So right here, good things are really are happening. He's putting a lot of stuff in trees. It's going really well. Everything's great. Then a rainstorm comes and knocks a bunch of stuff out of his tree. That's not a very good thing. And then he gets a bunch more stuff in his tree, and he discovers a secret place where there's a bunch of stuff, and he's getting grasshopper, and he's really a terror. And then a competitor comes and puts him in a fight, and tries to just take his stuff, and he has to really he's got a lot of anxiety and pressure, and that's a rough time. And then he prevails, and then the females come, and he scores, and everything's great. What an adventure. You might say, how does he know to keep moving this way? And what you might think is, right there, when in fact he's experiencing pleasure, we know that pleasure is in fact a cascade of chemicals in the pleasure centers of the brain. And Dr. Barnard talked about this on Friday, that what we have is a cascade of pleasure chemicals that are activating particular neural circuits in the mind, and those chemicals are things like dopamine and endorphins, things that cause a euphoria in the nervous system. And during sexual activity, you get the biggest flood of dopamine that you're ever going to get in animal life. The biggest signal, as you would expect. The actual behaviors that cause the reproduction of those DNA sequences, the actual most proximal behaviors associated with that, should be the behaviors that would be most intensively rewarded. And behaviors that are also important, for example, to survival, should also be very intensively rewarded, things like food. But the most pleasurable thing should be the thing that is most intimately related to the actual reproduction of DNA sequences, and that is exactly how this thing is designed. And so that is a big dopamine rush in the neural circuits of the brain to tell that organism, yes, you just did what we wanted you to do. You might think that when things are going well, I have to just tell you, you got to hang in there. This is all going to be about eating fruits and vegetables, stuff like that. I mean, that's where this thing is going. When things are going well, you might think that the nervous system might give this creature a little dopamine hit, like a little signal of the big dopamine and endorphins to come. That's not what nature did. Nature created a different set of incentives, completely independent from pleasure, very different experience. And those are the moods of happiness. The moods of happiness are a different experience. There are different neural circuits in the mind, and they are different neurochemicals. And we know, for example, that some of those chemicals are things like norepinephrine and serotonin. We don't know exactly how it all works, but it is clearly different. It is not the same thing as the activation of pleasure circuitry. And so what nature did was to have a gentle set of incentives and disincentives that worked like a guidance system. And in fact, what happiness is now, after 6,000 years of recorded speculation of what is happiness, as well as untold millennia before that, we finally know for the very first time right now, just in the last 5 years. This has not been known. We now know what happiness is. Happiness is the incremental feedback system, an automated reaction to that nervous system recognizing that you are making progress towards worthwhile biological goals. Those goals may be pleasure-seeking goals, or they may be pain avoidance goals. But what happiness is the temporary but repeatable consequence of a process. And that process is having success towards things that are worthwhile. And you will be happy so long as you are having that success, and as soon as you get some negative feedback, boom. So you can have a business and it's going pretty well and you're making phone calls and you're thinking, oh, pretty soon I'm going to be taking my sweetie to Hawaii because this is going to be really good. And what are we going to do in Hawaii? Oh yeah, that's right. We're going to eat really good food okay, now, so you're plotting this thing. And it's going well and the phone's ringing, you're booking orders. You're in a mood of happiness. And that mood of happiness can last all day long as you're getting good feedback. Moods of happiness are not limited. Pleasure is. Pleasure is the short-term, super intense flooding of the brain with neurochemistry to tell you, yes, dummy, you just did the right thing. Don't miss this. But it's designed by nature to be short-term. It's biologically very expensive. Whereas the moods of happiness are not. They're designed by nature to potentially last all day long. Except as soon as you get bad feedback, one lousy little measly phone call from the IRS can wreck your whole day. Now, suppose that we take this little guy and we say, okay, here's what we want to do. We're going to put him in a cage and we're going to improve his situation. And we're going to see to it that instead of flying out of the aviary and having to go and hunt down stuff and put him on thorns, we're going to put this guy in a cage and we're going to have two buttons here. One of those buttons is he can get out and he can start flying around putting bugs on thorns. He will have then a mechanism to tell him that he's making progress towards a worthwhile goal. Or what we're going to do is we're going to just let him hit this other button that's going to be a magic button. And in that magic button, what will happen is we'll present him with a female all doped up, all ready to go. Now come on, you guys. The men can respond, geniuses. Tell me which one this guy's going to do. He'll hit the magic button. Why? Energy conservation. And in fact, it won't just be the energy conservation. It will be the entire motivational triad. The pleasure-seeking mechanism, absolutely. The pain avoidance mechanism, yes. If he goes out into the aviary, he risks, in principle, exposure to predators and competitors, and therefore pain. So he will not do that. So what he'll do is he'll hit the magic button, and the energy conservation circuitry in his brain will recognize that is the easy way to go. The entire motivational triad will conspire so that we know exactly what he's going to do as soon as he figures out what those buttons do. And he, in fact, will do that. Now, suppose that we give him a different set of magic buttons. This time we put him back in the cage. And when we put him in the cage, one magic button is he gets presented with a female all doped up, ready to go. Great, it's good. The other button is the magic button this time. And we've got a little catheter in his head, and in that catheter we've got some cocaine. And what cocaine's going to do, we get it just right, so that will cause a dopamine flood in the pleasure centers of his brain that will be in fact equivalent to the dopamine flood he would get during sexual activity. And he figures this out. Now what's he going to do? He's going to hit the magic button, folks, for the very same reasons. Seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and complaints. And the conservation of energy. That's exactly why he's going to hit the magic button and get the cocaine. And he, in fact, will. Not only that, why would he want to put up with all that humping and pumping and sweat? Forget it. Just go right to the dopamine hit, and that's exactly what he will do. And he will do that even as death by starvation or dehydration approaches. This little guy will hit that button over and over and over and over again, because that is in fact the way his motivational structure is designed. Now you might say, Well, that's not very good because he'll deteriorate and get sick and so forth. And I would say, okay, well, what about if we do something else? What about if right about the time that he's starting to get really sick from doing this, we stop it and we dry him out, we put some IV fluids in there so that he can be healthy again, and then we let him go right back and start hitting that cocaine button again. And we make it so that this guy, this little gray shrike, gets more dopamine hits, more pleasure hits than any gray shrike that has ever lived. Would that have been a good life? What would have been missing from that life? The moods of happiness. The moods of happiness is what would have been missing, because even though he got more of this effectively than any other creature that had ever come before him, he got less of the secondary guidance system activation, the moods of happiness that are in fact the best of what life has to offer. In the mid-century in this country, we had a young man that came of age at just the right time. There had been gifts of technology that were quite remarkable, that were poised to give one individual a phenomenal career. Movie industries, recording industries, television, it's just waiting for one person to step in there. And Elvis was the one. Elvis, movie star, handsome, talented, came in at just the right time. And Elvis Presley got more dopamine hits than just about any man who has ever lived. But by the time he was my age, he was 6 feet under the ground. Elvis had been a martial arts enthusiast in his youth. Fundamentally happy character. There's no reason why he shouldn't have been. But tragically, what happened was he got caught in the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap is when the motivational triad, any component of it, is in fact trapped. The motivational system is trapped. And the organism cannot make any other choice except to go with its instinct, which is to get the most pleasure and the least pain for the least amount of effort possible. And if you put a creature in an unnatural environment for which those neural circuits were not designed, it makes mistakes, and it will make them over and over again, and it will be puzzled, and it will not be able to figure out its way home. You were designed with an internal compass pointing you the right direction to where your health and happiness, where your pleasure and your happiness were in fact all integrated. Whole natural foods tasted good. Sleeping to satiation, exercise, using your bodies, these all things all work together in your natural design to work perfectly to maximize your experience on this earth. That's how you're designed. But when you put in unnatural stimulation, when you so radically change the environment, these neural circuits cannot operate. And now we wind up with the big problem that we started this talk with. Why is it that once we know the right way to go today, why is it so hard and often we go the wrong direction? Very easily. Because you were not designed for the environment that you now live in. Saying, well, now this guy's usually kind of fun. This is getting serious. This guy's starting to sound like a preacher, minister, and it's a Sunday. It doesn't seem to come natural to him, but it does come natural because my grandfather was a Methodist minister. It comes a lot more natural than you might think. These dangerous shortcuts are traps. They are, in fact, they come in 3 styles: pleasure-seeking trap, pain avoidance trap, or energy conservation trap. They're all trouble. The pleasure trap, pleasure-seeking part we just talked about. The pain avoidance trap is very dangerous. We have, in fact, the most respected vocation on the planet is how to get people out of pain. We call that modern medicine. Modern medicine has a lot to offer and has actually many miracles, but it is also very much abused. Our abilities to go in and interrupt pain are dangerous, and we have to use those with great judgment, because modern medicine is in fact one of the biggest causes of addiction. Now, we're going to talk about the biggest problem that our country faces in terms of its health and happiness, and that is the food supply. Why is it that people are doing what they're doing? Why is it that they can't get the right direction even after they know which direction they should go? What foods are in fact the most popular? Let's take a look at what we're seeing. Chocolate. Whole natural foods have a certain amount of energy per bite or per pound. So for example, raw salad has about 100 calories a pound. It's okay. It's not bad. Crunchy. It's nice. Things like steamed vegetables or vegetables that you would eat steamed, things like carrots and corn and things like that, they have about 200 calories a pound. And you can taste the difference. So if you taste a carrot that's ripe, you can pick up that extra carbohydrate. You know the difference between that and romaine lettuce. It tastes good. Now fruit, that's even better. You smell peaches ripening on the tree. You've got neural circuits in there to tell you, hey, there's some more calories in there. It's about 300 calories a pound. If you get yourself good and hungry, it turns out there's things that even taste better. And I've had the opportunity to watch people when they get really hungry. And although they'd like some salad, and actually they'd like some carrots, and they'd actually like some fruit, the truth is that when you have baked potatoes or rice cooking, they can really smell that. They really like it. Those are about 500 calories a pound. Chocolate is 2,500 calories a pound. Causes a major dopamine hit in the pleasure centers of the brain. Way more than was designed by nature to be there. It is, in fact, part of the pleasure trap. It causes such a lift that some people, some women, feel obliged to ask if they're given the choice between, say, chocolate and sexual activity. They might ask, what kind of chocolate? How many pieces? Men don't ask that. Hot dogs. This is completely unnatural food. 70–80% fat. Fat is 4,000 calories a pound, pure fat. Turns out that human beings don't generally like pure fat to eat. But as we get close to pure fat, something like chocolate at 2,500 calories a pound or hot dogs at 70% fat, we're getting up there. We're getting extremely high caloric densities. Cheese, totally unnatural food. If you see any cheese bushes out there, you let me know. 1,700 calories a pound, 6 times as calorically dense as an apple. 3 or 4, 3.5 times as calorically dense as baked potatoes. Health food? I don't think so. French fries. What exactly is a French fry? French fries, this little bit of potato, should be all right. And then what we do is we dip it down into the deep fryer, which is pure oil, pure fat. Usually been reheated many times with all kinds of free radical formation likely as a result of that, but we won't talk about that. We'll just talk about the pure oil, pure fat. And then we pull it out of there. It's like a little sponge for the fat, and it's dribbling the fat as it comes towards your mouth, and then we throw some sodium on there, so some salt on there, and stick it in there. It's basically a vector for getting fat into you. Now, it's a little bit healthier than if you stuck the straw right into the deep fryer. But not much. Chips. That's just a French fry cut from the other side. Burgers. Well, you've probably heard plenty about burgers. Huge quantities of fat. Completely unnatural animals now that we're dealing with. That these animals have their mechanisms of satiation completely filled full of hormones so that they'll grow at a natural rate. It's a really high fat creature. Not anything remotely like anything that any of our ancestors should have been eating or did. Pizza. This is great. So what is it that we do? What we take is we take something like whole wheats, and then we turn it into flour, but in doing that, what we do is we pull out all the fiber and the water and the minerals. So what we've got left is really concentrated refined carbohydrate, white bread. Then we put a little bit of tomato sauce on there, but we make sure we put lots of salt in there. And then we take a whole bunch of cheese, 1,700 calories a pound, throw that in there. And then we put little bits of hot dog or salami or whatever you want to call it. And that's a pizza. Really, really successful commercially, as you would expect. Donuts, enough said, we know what that is. Ice cream, introduced in Paris in 1677. And what did we do? You take sugar cane or something like that, or beets, and then you isolate out just the pure crystalline carbohydrate. Pure sugar at 1,800 calories a pound, really calorically dense. Leave behind all the fiber and the water and the minerals and everything healthy about that thing. Just take the pure calories from there. And then we take cow's milk. You know, that stuff that was designed by nature to have a little bitty cow turn into a great big animal in about 6 months? That's what we take, really, really high fat food. We take that cow's milk, squeeze it out of there, then we've got this milk here, and then we let it sit and precipitate, so we get just the pure fat off the top. We take the pure fat from the cow's milk and the pure sugar from that, and we mix it together, we get ice cream. Rave reviews for over 300 years, and it's not going to stop. It's exactly what you'd expect, that people would love that stuff. It's not their fault. It's not our fault. These are environmental stimulants for which we are not designed. Oh, more chocolate. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, okay. Now, let's look at what it is that we're going to do with this. What we need to do is realize that these are products for which we were not designed, and in fact, they are pleasure trapping the psychology of human beings. And that's why it's so difficult to do the right thing, even once we know the right thing to do. Oh yeah, that's right. That's the pleasure trap. Now, whole natural foods, these are things like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, beans, etc. These are the kind of foods that the research literature over and over again have demonstrated are supportive of our health. This is the direction to go. We know that this is the direction to go. Some of us will debate whether it should be a little more of this or a little less of that. That's fine. That's all fair debate. But the truth is, we know the general direction, which direction that compass is actually pointing. And that's the direction that we need to go. But here's why it's difficult. You see that there's 5 quadrants to this graph. They represent 5 different stages. In stage 1 here, this is where a person might be consuming whole natural foods. And here, this is what we're going to call pleasure quotient zone. I don't know why I put quotient in there. There's too much math background from Ralph, who wanted me to be a mathematician instead of an artist. So I became a psychologist to get even. Now, the pleasure zones might be subnormal, normal, or enhanced. And in stage 1 in whole natural foods, what's going to happen is that human beings are going to have a normal amount of pleasure activation in the brain as a result of eating these foods. And there's going to be a couple factors that are going to influence just how much pleasure you get from your foods. For example, how hungry are you? How long has it been since you've eaten? If it's been 6 or 8 or 10 hours, that food's going to taste better than if it's only been an hour. How hungry you are is going to be monitored and driven by neural circuits in the mind to help you survive and reproduce. It's very, very elegant. And so the sensitivity of the tongue is going to be variable dependent upon just how important the nervous system should organize the priorities of behavior. So if you've just eaten a whole bunch, you're full, then things aren't going to taste that good. It's time to do other things. It's time to do reproductive activity. It's time to educate the children. It's time to look out for predators. It's no longer time to be eating anymore. That's how this thing is. The motivational triad is woven its way into literally the taste buds on your tongue. Now, also, so the caloric density of the food is also the other issue. The more calories per bite in there, the more pleasure that it's going to give you, as we've discussed. So those 2 factors, how hungry are you and how calorically dense the food is, those 2 things are going to work together to define how much pleasure activation is going to be in the nervous system. And in stage 1 here, in the first phase, it works beautifully, just the way it was designed. In stage 2, we see something happens. In stage 2, this is where we're going to introduce all those foods we just talked about. All the unnatural foods. So we've now massively increased the caloric density of the food, and as no surprise, you're going to have an enhanced pleasure experience. Now, I don't care if you sit cross-legged in the lotus position, or however this works, staring at a book by Dr McDougall. It's not going to make any difference. If you eat those kinds of foods, you will have an enhanced pleasure response. It doesn't matter. This is part of your nature. There's no way to stop this. Now, the thing is that once it is that you have eaten this stuff for a while, the nervous system goes through a process called neuroadaptation. The nerves adapt. This is what the neurologists call it. Psychologists used to call it habituation. Regular people just say, you get used to it. And that's how this works. And this works across all sensory domains, not just taste. So for example, if we had this normal amount of light that we have in this room, and then we turned on extra lights, you would have an increased sense of brightness, wouldn't you? But for about how long? 15, 20 minutes. And then what happens is you get used to it, and now, even at the higher level of stimulation, the actual true stimulation, it doesn't seem brighter. That's if you go into someone's house at holiday season. You smell a Christmas tree or a wreath. It smells great. Increased concentration of that particulate matter in the environment. For about how long? 15, 20 minutes. You've got friends in a pool. It's a hot day. And they say, oh, come on, it feels great. Put your toe in the water. Feels cold. You say, hey, it's too cold. No, it's not. It's great. No, it's cold. No, it's not. It's great. Come on in. And you go in, and what happens? 15, 20 minutes later, oh, it feels great. Well, the temperature of the water didn't change. You changed. We tend to think that our nervous systems are giving us a one-to-one relationship to reality. They're not. They're giving you a relative relationship to reality. And they are changing dependent upon the nature of that stimulation. That happens in all sensory domains, and it happens in taste. Yeah. So what happens is that at stage 3 here, eating all this heated, beated, chopped, processed crap that everybody eats, that this is what their experience is. They are not having any more pleasure from their food than if you were over here eating whole natural foods here. There's no difference. So someone like a Dom DeLuise or anybody like that, they think that I'm a complete bongo head and have no idea how to live. They think, and your friends and family and people that are not enlightened, they think that they are here and you are here. They think that they are living the good life and that you don't know what's good. But the truth is that they're not having any more satisfaction out of their food than you are if you eat healthfully. And that's how it is. The only thing that happens, though, is if you are here and then you go to here, it does taste good. And that's the problem with the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap is when you're doing the right thing and then you do the wrong thing, it feels good. Uh-oh, we got a problem. And if you're here and you've been doing the wrong thing for a while, now you're used to it, and now you do the right thing, guess what happens? Uh-oh, we got a problem. Can you imagine anything more tricky than getting out of the pleasure trap? Every time you do the right thing, it feels wrong. Every time you do the wrong thing, it feels right. Now we suddenly are starting to see why people are so lost. Why even once they know the right direction to go, even though they know what to do to save their health, they have a very hard time doing it because it's going exactly counter to instinct. Now, there's a way out. In stage 4 here, this is what Dr McDougall and Neil Barnard and Joel Fuhrman are all talking about. That if you then go the right direction, what happens is you will come out of it. Dr. Esselstyn will tell people, look, it's going to take you a couple months. Other people say 6 weeks. Then if we're trying to get really soft on you and try to really entice you in, we tell you 3 weeks. Well, I'm telling you the truth. It's not 3 weeks. You can get a start. You can get a start in 3 days. You can get a real good start in about 10 days. But it takes some time. It takes some getting used to, just like any other drug addiction. Because what I'm arguing here is that these foods are like drugs. That's how they're working. Now, ways out of the trap. How do we get out of the trap? Well, one thing that's very important is if you're in the pleasure trap, and this is where America lives, right there in stage 3 of the pleasure trap, and that's where they die. That's where you've got 75 to 80% of the people are going out to strokes, heart attacks, congestive heart failure, diabetes, cancer. This is what's causing it. This is a nightmare. And yet if they ever pick up a book by one of these people, if they ever visit one of these doctors, they are still in a fight because their nervous system doesn't want them to do it. The ways out, number one for you, you know that if you chomp the stuff and do the right thing, by gosh, 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to be out of the trap, you're going to be fine. But sometimes you need help. Sometimes you can get yourself into trouble and you need some other techniques. Here's some other things that you can do. If you've been messing up and it's a Sunday night, you've completely wrecked your weekend and you know that you're back right there, you're in stage 3 of the pleasure trap, and you're in trouble. Here's a couple things you can do. Number one, you might go on, say, a juice diet or a mono diet with watermelon. Do that for 2 or 3 days. If you do that, what's going to happen is that you're not going to allow any salt or any fat to be hitting those receptors in the tongue. All you're going to be allowing in there is the carbohydrate. And that's fine, because now we're going to resensitize the salt receptors and the fat receptors, and we're going to help you 2 or 3 days later then suddenly foods with some of those materials in there at normal levels, bowl, oatmeal, things like that, now that's good again. So that can be very helpful. Another thing that can be helpful is to get yourself good and hungry. So on Sunday night, you've been blowing it, you chowed down about 3,000 or 4,000 calories of stuff that day, and you say, all right, I'm in trouble. Go for a day without eating. Just completely forget it. Wait till Monday night to eat. Suffer, you got a little headache in the morning, your stomach's a little gnawing, that's all right. You're designed by nature quite well to miss a couple of meals. Relax. Get yourself good and hungry, and you come back, and now a meal that's appropriate has more appeal. That's another thing that you can do. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you need to go to prison. There's different kinds of prisons. There's low security prisons, high security prisons. In this country, if you break the law, if you steal $1,000, you might go to prison. You deserve it. You steal $1,000 from people, people work hard for that. You deserve to be punished and have that driven into you. But if you steal $1 billion, what's the problem? So we've got 2 different kinds of prisons. Now, if you steal $1 billion, you go to a low security prison, you work on your tennis game. You negotiate to get the really nice mattress in there, everything's fine. The food's pretty good. That's like Dr McDougall's program. Dr McDougall's program is what I call, it's like club fed. It's wonderful. I love the program. I work there, do my preaching there. They have great food. It's in a resort-like atmosphere up in Santa Rosa. It's beautiful. It's low security, so it means they'll let you out. You can tootle around the wine country. You don't get to drink any wine, though, but hey. It's a wonderful experience, and it's about 10 days, and it gives people a head start or gets them back on track. It's a great experience. And in fact, I like it so much that I work there, as I said, but I would do my preaching there for nothing. I love it. And John, if you're listening, I would work for free, but then we wouldn't be friends. But sometimes a low security program is not enough. Sometimes you need high security. That's the other program. Program at a place that Dr. Alan Goldhammer runs and I work with. It's called True North. It's like a compass pointing you once again the right direction. And at True North, what we do is we lock you up in our high security prison, and it's 6 miles away from the nearest Taco Bell. You have no choice. There's no transportation. You're stuck. And what you do there is you don't eat the really nice gourmet vegetarian prepared food. No, forget it. It's prison. It's bread and water, except without the bread. I think I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. It's water-only fasting. Water-only fasting is the complete abstinence of all substances, everything. I'm not talking about a little chicken and fish. I'm not even talking about carrots. Forget about it. I'm talking about water. Now, relax. We don't go that long. We don't take people more than 30, 40 days on average. It's true. We will sometimes fast people up to 40 days, but that's unusual. Most of the time what we do is we'll fast people for a week or two. And let me tell you something. You might say, all right, the psychologist, we're getting it. He's a complete whack job. But you know you're designed by nature to fast. What do you think your fat stores are? Your fat stores are, in fact, part of a two-part biological system to help you get through periods of caloric deprivation in nature. Our ancestors would often go through periods of time when there wouldn't be any food for a couple weeks. Spring would come late. And when that happened, the body took advantage of that situation to water-only fast, and a whole host of systems got engaged. And the healing that can take place in that environment is absolutely remarkable. And I want you to, if you have any interest in that, I'll encourage you to visit our website and learn more about this. But probably the most important thing that comes about in water-only fasting is this. By completely putting the tongue under sensory deprivation, by letting it have no food whatsoever, it most rapidly recovers its appreciation for whole natural foods. If you think about our light analogy, what we had in here, what you had is if you had the lights on and then we added light, it would seem brighter, and then we would get used to it, and it would seem okay. And then there's two ways back home. We could either turn off the new light, at which point it would seem dim for a while, and then we would come back after 15 minutes or so. Or you could turn off all the lights, blacken all the shades, not let any light in at all, complete sensory deprivation. And at that point then, you come back in 2 minutes, and the lights seem really bright. And that's what happens with whole natural food after water-only fasting. These two programs, the McDougall program and the True North Health program, are my favorite. I happen to work at both places, but I'd say that about it even if I didn't work there. They are two fine ways to help you if you need extra help. Now, encapsulating everything that I know about this problem, my friend Alan and I have written a book called The Pleasure Trap. When we wrote The Pleasure Trap, it was about everything that we could figure out about how to help people get back on the right direction. It was a compass, something that they could carry with them, something that they could give to their family and friends to help explain why it is they're doing this wacky thing that they're doing. And also, when we got finished with this, we thought, who do we want to dedicate this to? And we thought about our parents, people that you owe the most to. And I thought about Ralph, and I said, forget it. You destroyed my art career, now we're even. We really thought about who we owed the most to, and we thought about people like T. Colin Campbell, thought about people like Dr McDougall, who went back to school after he became a doctor and said, you know what, my people aren't getting better, so I better go back and learn to be a better doctor, and became an internist. Found out they didn't know anything either. He said, well, fine, I got to figure it out for myself. And then he did. People like Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn. These guys, along with people like Howard Lyman, John Robbins, William Castelli, Joel Furman, these people are telling the truth, and they're trying to figure out as best they can and give it to you as straight as they can. And these guys, even though they will squabble among themselves like some brothers, and they are kind of like brothers, get them around at a table, and they want to ask, but they also want to tell. These guys, if one of these bongo heads with the bongo head beach diet would come in here, these guys would just come together and tear them apart. Show no mercy. These guys are about telling the truth. But we owed more than just to these guys. Also to the people, the shoulders that they stood on. In fact, across history, the whole pursuit of human beings standing up heroically and telling the truth and trying to discover about health and happiness. That's who we dedicated our book to. But we wrote it for you. We wrote it for me. Wrote it for people that are actually struggling today with the problems of the pleasure trap. We wrote it as a compass to give to you as a guidance system as part of that, a way to encourage you to move the right direction. This is a difficult journey. This is not easy. This is a great challenge, and it's very important. If you came here this weekend to join, to learn, you're just getting started, I welcome you, and I'm glad you came. I'm thankful to whoever it is that brought you here, or whatever it is that brought you here, and I hope that we do our job well. If you are a veteran and you have been here before or been around trying to walk this road, struggle with this journey, and you came and invested your time, I applaud you. This is a good place to come, a good place to get moral support, to see that you're not alone. I'm glad that you're here too. If you are here with a bigger game in mind, that you understand that it's not just about your health, but it's also a bigger problem that humanity faces. In fact, that the entire future of the planet may be at stake on this very issue. I salute you for your thinking, for your contributions, however great or small, in this effort as we try to do the right thing for the future. But no matter how much we can support each other, we must each walk this walk alone in some ways. We have to make our own choices. No one else can do it for us. But if you walk beside me, I can offer you this warning and this promise that it is likely to be the most difficult and yet most rewarding path to choose. Thank you very much for your time.